Well, great. I'm sure some others will jump on, but let's go ahead and jump in for those that are here, and appreciate you being here. This is a topic that there's a lot to it. This is a new format for our webinars that we're trying. We're trying a kind of a 30-minute power lunch almost type of thing, and just to kind of see if we can get some really good content out there, but know everyone's really busy, right? We want everyone to kind of be able to consume and digest this information, and we know it's really important, and it's really important to us. We're passionate about it. So there's a lot of content in 30 minutes. But again, hopefully the goal of this is to give you guys kind of 5 strategies, 5 steps to take away so that you guys can be like this guy on your screen here, standing on top of the mountain and very successful with your SharePoint deployment. So let's jump right in and get going with this. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Curtis Hughes. I'm one of the managing partners and co-founders of C5 Insight. Got my contact information. Love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Follow me on Twitter. Email me. Please grab that information. Won't talk a ton about us. You can visit us and love to tell you more, but I won't spend your time on this webinar talking about us. But the biggest thing is my experience with SharePoint. So I've been in the SharePoint space over 15 years now. So SharePoint, before it became SharePoint around 99 or 2000, it was Site Server, another product that kind of morphed and changed into a few products and became SharePoint ultimately around 2000, 2001. So I've been in that world for a long time with collaboration. It's been a ton of my time with our clients on collaboration, employee engagement, user adoption, the very things you guys are very, very interested in. So that's kind of my experience and some of what we were about. Definitely focused on SharePoint, but also focused on Dynamic CRM. So would happy to tell you more about us if you want to, but I won't spend the time on the webinar to talk about that right now. If you're social and so inclined to kind of tweet and share, we'd love for you to do that. There's a couple hashtags on here, and our C5 Insight handle on Twitter, and also my Curtis handle here on Twitter. So feel free. Would love for you guys to tweet and share. We love that kind of interaction, and it's much appreciated if you guys feel so inclined. So let's jump right in and kind of talk about the agenda that we're gonna go through today. So I've got 2 areas I want to focus on. And again, 30-minute format to try to get some really good meaty information into it is a challenge, but I love that kind of challenge. So I broke this up into 2 parts, right? First is the adoption impact, what I'm calling basically how adoption and lack thereof is affecting our projects. And I've got some stats around that. We'll honestly only spend 2 or 3 minutes on this section just talking about, hey, you guys obviously know it's important. You're here for this webinar. You know you want to get some real good takeaways. But I just want to kind of share some things that maybe make you kind of go, wow, I didn't really know it was that prevalent across organizations, and talk through that for just a moment. And the majority of our time, obviously, is going to be spent on what I'm calling the adoption accelerators. This is the 5 strategies, the 5 steps that I want you guys to take away with some supporting information that hopefully you can apply in your organization today. I know all of you are at various stages in your journey with SharePoint. Some may be just starting a project, some may be on 2010. Thinking about going to 2013, some may be midway through a project, or some may be finished with their deployment and realizing, or as I heard, I was at SharePoint Fest Seattle last week delivering a couple sessions, and one person said, hey, we're through the honeymoon stage, right? We've been about a year in, people were super excited, and now we're starting to get that sizzle. How do I keep people engaged? How do I keep people going? So you guys may be at all different stages, and hopefully you guys will get something from this that you can apply to any stage that you're in. So let's jump right in and talk about the adoption impact. So the biggest part of this is that I've really got some good news and I've got some bad news. So get the bad news out of the way first. The bad news is that about 60% of people that try to implement SharePoint, organizations that are implementing SharePoint, are failing in some form or fashion. That may be struggling, that may be just kind of floundering around. It's out there, but man, is it really providing value? Is it giving me anything that I can really get a return on? And so this is an AIIM stat that was, I think, 2013 or 2014, that basically said that around 60% of organizations are really just struggling and failing to meet their expectations with SharePoint. So what this kind of translates to, and there's a lot of reasons for this, right? A lot of times it's adoption. People, get it out there and people aren't adopting it, so that's seen as a failure. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Sometimes it's we thought it would do all these things, and it just turned out to not be able to do all the things we thought it would do. And if we kind of build upon this, AMR Research came out with a study again in the last couple of years that basically said about 1 in every 3 organizations, about 30% or so, are struggling with user adoption in their organization. So obviously you're not alone. and it's prevalent. It's across, and I honestly think this number is probably low based on the people we talk to, when we're at events and organizations that come to us. I honestly think this is probably anywhere between 40 and 50% that are struggling with adoption. And so what's going on with the technologies that between 2007 SharePoint and 2010 and 2013, and now it's 2016, if you've read any on that, the technology is getting better and better and better, but we're not getting any better and sometimes getting worse at using that technology. So I'm going to spend some time on that and why that is. And I know I've painted kind of a bleak picture here, so I'll get to the good news. The good news is that we now know a lot of the reasons why these things are happening, right? So we spend a ton of our time almost being obsessive about why organizations are struggling, not just with adoption, but that 60% failure as well. Why are these things failing? Asking these questions of, it's great to look at success, but let's learn from the failures. Let's make sure we're addressing the problem and not the symptom. Let's make sure we're looking at those. So that's where this webinar came from. It's really taking some of our lessons learned, packaging those up into 5 concrete things that you guys can take away to hopefully enhance and stimulate, if you will, some of your adoption throughout your organization. So with that aside, knowing that, hey, there's a big problem out there, we spend a lot of time studying this problem, what's going on. And again, as you guys know, I mean, there's tons of information out there on adoption, and it would take us, many hours and much more than 30 minutes to go through all the deep dive on adoption. But I want to give you 5 things and hopefully some nuggets that you guys can carry away. We'd love for you guys to come back and say, hey, what did you mean by this? And we'd love to have future conversations with you, obviously. So let's jump right into some of what I'm calling the adoption accelerators. What can you guys do as a part of your project or before you even start your project that will actually help you throughout your organization and throughout your project lifecycle? So a little bit of quick background, or just to kind of frame this up and give some context. So we actually take pride in actually telling people that we're experts in failure and experts in project rescue. And you can read this on the screen and kind of go through it. But ultimately, and to kind of simply put this, a few years ago, we kind of noticed a trend that a lot of organizations coming to us weren't looking for brand new implementations, never had SharePoint. There's still a few of those. There's still a handful of people. But there's a lot of people that are using the technologies, especially on the Microsoft side, right, with SharePoint, CRM, and these kind of things. But we looked at this and said, oh, why are so many people coming to us that already have this? Let's look at these. And what we found out was that close to 60%, which is interestingly done totally separate, but lines up almost with that 61% struggle. But about 59% of our new projects, new business, and new proposals that we're submitting are around what we're calling CPR or project rescue. Basically, people coming to us, organizations coming to us, that have their hand raised and say, hey, we've got SharePoint, we implemented a year ago, 2 years ago, sometimes 4 or 5 years ago, and they're on an old version, but no one ever used it. We just never got traction. We're trying to get this thing going again, all kinds of reasons. But about 59, 60% of our work is around that. So we have become experts in why people are struggling. And we've talked to every single one of these organizations about why did you struggle? What did you do to get you here? What's happening? And what can we turn around? Because what we want to do is focus on not necessarily all the successes. Those are great. But like I said before, focus on the failures. Focus on things that are kind of sending us off in the wrong direction. And if we can eliminate those things and get us on a new path, then we'll be better suited to have a successful project. And that's what we've done. We've turned a lot of these around, and so that's where a lot of these adoption strategies and steps come from. So without further ado, let's jump right in and go through a few of these as well. So step number 1 is not to start with the tools, right? So the first thing I want you guys to think about, and I'll explain this because a lot of you on here probably already have SharePoint, and you're saying, well, wait a minute, we already have the tool. We're beyond starting with a tool. We're beyond this point. Let me explain for just a moment. Even if you already have SharePoint, you can still apply this step, and this is why I put this as step number 1, because part of what we see happening within organizations is, especially in the last few years with the technology getting so good. I mean, there are so many things, and if you're on online Office 365, I mean, you've seen all the hype and marketing, and it's great stuff. Trust me, it's great, awesome technology, cool stuff around Delve, all the new Office groups, all the new functionality, Yammer, everything else that's taking place online, right? There's some really cool stuff. But with this growth of all these cool tools and everything, people are really starting to look at these as, man, they'll solve all our problems. We can put these in, and I hate to use the term quick fix, but it's almost like that, where they're looking for this kind of quick win, quick fix. Let's put technology in place, and man, we're going to collaborate better. And a lot of people are kind of taking this tool mentality and running with it. So even if you have SharePoint, what I'm asking you to do, even if it's for the next 20 minutes, lay that aside, and let's talk through some of the other underlying issues, because I'm going to tell you the truth. As we go through these 5, you'll notice that none have to do specifically with technology. People are not failing to adopt these things because the technology is too hard or some other reasons. There's a lot of reasons going on. You'll notice that trend as we go through these. And the best way I tell this story sometimes is, on Saturday morning over this past weekend, I didn't wake up in the morning, go out to my garage, pick up a hammer off my workbench, and say, man, what can I hammer on today, right? What do I need to hammer? Let me just find something to hammer. And that's honestly what people are doing with these tools. We love the tools, but people are starting with the tool and coming to us and saying, hey, what can I do with this tool? Tell me what other people are doing with it. What do I need to do with it? Tell me how to use it. And that's like somebody picking up a saw or a hammer and saying, all right, what do I need to do with this? Show me how to use it. What do I need to find something to saw on. And it's just crazy, right? So we don't do anything else that way. Why should we start with SharePoint? So you've got SharePoint. Most of you probably have SharePoint if you're on this webinar. You've got SharePoint, but for a moment, just lay it aside and say the tool's great. We know the tool can support us in a lot of ways. We don't want to make it become the silver bullet. Let's talk about some of the other things that we want to focus on first. And really, it comes back to focusing on not the tool, but the things around the tool, and what are we trying to achieve, and what are our goals for this project. And if you want a little bit more proof, there was a study put out by Gartner. Everybody knows Gartner. Carol Roswell. You can Google it and probably download the PDF as well. I think it's actually out there now, and find a lot of information. But she put out a big study, lots of good media information in there about basically why companies are struggling with these new social and collaboration technologies such as SharePoint. And what she found was that it was because they were putting so much focus on the content and the technology and what it could do in the functionality, and which web part am I going to buy, and what third-party add-in am I going to get to do workflows the right way, and all this special technology, and not focusing on the people using it, the business value, what problem they were trying to solve, and all the other things around it. So I know you kind of hear that a lot of times, but it's true. If you focus on the tool first and not on what you're trying to solve and all the underlying issues, especially change management, adoption, the things you're here for, it's going to cause your project to really struggle, even if the technology is implemented flawlessly without any issues, which we know is always not the case as well. So if we're not focusing on tools and technology, then what are we focusing on? And what I would like to tell you guys is kind of step number 2, shifting our focus from the tool to now our people. Because at the end of the day, people are at the heart of every SharePoint project, right? I mean, people are the ones that use it. I don't know about you, but I don't have robots or animals or anything else that is working on our SharePoint. It's people in our organization, and probably yours as well, that are creating things, that are using SharePoint, that are collaborating, that are working together, that are innovating, that are coming up with ideas, that are solving problems, right? It's people. So what I'm going to propose is shift your focus from the tool, the technology, all the great things that it can do, and spend some time. Doesn't mean you need to spend 6 months on it, but spend some time on the people first, and then we can come back, to the tool and make sure the tool is just that, supporting the people and the problem that you're trying to solve, right? It makes a lot of sense when you kind of reframe it that way. So again, practically, I mean, just some questions to ask about focusing on your people. What do our people need to do their job better? Because at the end of the day, it's what's in it for me, right? People want to know how it's going to help them, how it's going to help them do their jobs better, and that's what it should be doing. It should be solving business problems. It should be helping us innovate, bring people together, knock down silos, and build bridges. Ask what people are struggling with. What are people saying? What are some pains that people are facing, and what are some complaints I hear from some of my employees that are out there, and some of the people. And again, one of the things we found is that when you get people involved in the process, not just understanding what their needs are and their challenges, but get them involved in the process. And again, goes back to focusing on your people. Build out a core project team that is a part of this whole project from start to finish. And it's pretty amazing the adoption that we've seen when you build this team and get these people engaged, and how that kind of spreads throughout the organization versus a small team of 1 or 2, maybe just in IT, that owns SharePoint and kind of keeps it to themselves, and adoption doesn't go anywhere. We see that happen a lot, actually. So we always say people will always support and use what they help create. So get people involved, give people a voice, get people on your team, and give them, allow them to provide feedback and feel like they're a part of something, because people are always going to get involved, personally attach themselves, and get emotionally invested, and will use something that they feel like they've had a hand in building. So it's amazing what you can do when you, again, there's some psychology, and I've got a new session that I delivered last week at SharePoint Fest called The Human Factor, talking a lot about the psychology of SharePoint and how focusing on our people is actually solving a lot of problems. We'll probably do we've actually got it up there as a video on YouTube, but we'll probably do another webinar on that one later as well. So people are a huge issue, and we need to make sure we focus on the right areas as well. And the last thing I want to kind of talk through is our people are changing, right? We're focusing on our people. We need to focus on how people are actually working today. And there's some stats. You can read those on the screen. But I would probably venture to guess that most of you guys don't come in the office every single day. If you do, you probably don't want to, and you probably work a lot with people that are not in your office. People probably in other countries, other time zones. And in fact, about half the workforce is probably not going to be in our offices sitting beside us over the next 5 years. And so people are mobile. People are not coming into the office. People are working different cultures, different languages across time zones. And people are used to working, especially the social media. 30% of the entire world population is on social media. So that's actually shaping how we communicate. In part of my session last week, I talked about how the human brain actually has a shorter attention span now than a goldfish, which is kind of depressing, actually. So it's amazing how much these technologies and tweeting and status updates and all these kind of things, texting, have shifted how we're focusing. So it's important to understand how that's going to affect my collaboration. We can't just throw the same things at it that we've always done. Here's an intranet and here's a corporate homepage, and expect people just to adopt it and use it, because people don't work like that now, right? People are working differently. So trying, again, focusing on the people, not the technology, and understanding how do our people work? What do they want? Do I have a very young company, a lot of millennials and Gen Z that will be coming up in the next 5 years, or do I have a lot of boomers and a lot of people that are at the end of their careers and trying to work? And so we've got this large gap, and we see it all the time with 25, 30-year-olds working with 55, 60, 65-year-olds, and they work very differently. All have great ideas, but they work in different ways. So making sure we're finding ways to bring those people together. Spend a lot of time on that one, but it's really, really important to make sure we're focusing on the people and not missing out on the reason we're building these things in the first place. The next thing I want to talk about, once you've kind of shifted your focus from, all right, we know we're not going to talk so much about the technology, let's focus on our people. As we start to put together now, you're starting to think about requirements and how do we focus on our people and what kind of things do they need in place, and we're talking to the users and getting feedback. What happens is a lot of times around this stage, governance starts getting put into place, right? And we hear governance so much. It's a huge buzzword out there, and sometimes overused as well. But most of you guys, have heard of this small little firm that we like to call Enron, that a few years ago we can thank for all the compliance and regulation that kind of came about for us. So we've got SOX and HIPAA and all kinds of regulations that are out there, right? And so, in fact, there are over 14,000 state and industry laws and standards and regulations that dictate, just on paper and electronic records, there's over 14,000. Here's a tip: you don't have to implement every single one, right? I mean, it's kind of funny and kind of kidding, but again, we see a lot of people take that to the extreme and say, we got to lock this down and we've got to do that and do that. So we see people putting too many rules in place, and that's really where this comes down to. They've taken the governance and the security and the management of it to an extreme. And we've actually seen that cause people to not adopt the system, and it's actually the anti-collaboration, right? As you think about it, people don't want to do things if it's very restrictive. And if I told you, hey, you can choose any color you want, but it's got to be blue, you'd look at me like I was crazy, right? So we're doing the same thing with SharePoint a lot of times when we're down on a project or a collaboration site that should be purely collaboration and people working together and kind of working how they want to. We see people saying, man, it is just difficult to do things. I've got to download this and upload this and jump through three steps and put in 20 pieces of metadata and whatever it is. So a lot of regulations, a lot of standards. So what we've come up with is kind of a pretty simple way to think about it. And again, oversimplifying, but it really helps frame up, and hopefully for you guys as well. We like to say to stay rigid at the core, and flexible at the edges. And what that means is every company has a set of non-negotiables, right? You guys all have certain things that we've got HIPAA, we've got SOX, we've got to retain things for 7 years, 9 years, whatever they are. We've got to have auditing processes in place and locks for legal and holds and everything like that. So what do we need to do for that? And that's your rigid core, that's your non-negotiables. But then as you get out to my sites and collaboration, you don't need to have maybe check-in, check-out. Maybe you don't need to restrict it so people can't create their own views and people can't do whatever they want to, right? So we want to make sure that as you get out and people start to collaborate on this, you're not so restrictive and keep it rigid at the core and flexible at the edges. The next thing I want to talk about, and I know we're winding up on time, we've got about 10 minutes left, is to have a formal plan. And again, as you bring all this full cycle and you start to put all this information together, it's funny how many of us have goals and grand goals, but don't have a plan to achieve those goals. You know, if I'm trying to lose weight and lose 20 pounds, that's a great goal, but if I don't have a plan to get there, how am I going to achieve that goal? So I love this quote by Stephen Covey that basically talks about how, you know, it's pure fantasy, and we should just stop setting goals if we're not going to have a plan to achieve them, right? If we're not going to have a plan, and I may be jumping ahead because many of you guys may say, you know what, we just don't have a goals at all. So maybe you should start there. Start with clear and measurable goals. Set goals and metrics, because you'll never know if you've achieved it, what check boxes have been checked, if I don't have any goals for what I want this accomplished. And I can tell you as a sidebar, creating an intranet, quote unquote, is not a goal, right? What are you even trying to achieve? Creating an intranet is not your goal. That's maybe how you get there to solve that. So again, not talking about project plan, also talking about your roadmap, how you're going to get there, your adoption plan. What are we going to try to achieve? How are we going to know if people are adopting this? And just having plans around what we're trying to do. And again, I want to go through these so you guys can get some of the information and make sure we finish on time. But there's some stats on here, and you can see how important it is. These are stats, and you can see the references down below for how much planning really helps with SharePoint adoption. So again, 30% increase in project success when we just have a multi-departmental steering committee. So we spend a lot of time with organizations setting up governance, and we've actually got a governance toolkit. If you want to learn more about that, email myself or Allison or our Luck email address you'll see at the end. And we've got a toolkit that we give you guys, which has a bunch of templates and things in it as well. 50% of project managers say they just, you know, fail to achieve what they set out, mostly because they didn't have a good, clear roadmap and how they were going to get there. And then lastly, we talk about, you know, be specific. Let's not have fuzzy business objectives. Let's not have people that are out of sync. How do we keep people in sync? How do we make sure people know what we're working on and how we're going to get there? And so speaking of that, it kind of brings us to our last step in our strategy, which is basically to prepare and proclaim. And what I mean by that is people are going to use something that they know how to use, right? And people get on board, and we see it all the time when people know how. And you're like, okay, I know. We do training. We make sure we train people. We get people up to speed, and we know all those kind of things. But let me dig into this, because I put a couple pieces to this and kind of split this prepare and proclaim out. So if we take prepare first, 3 things I want to focus on there. 1, training is not an event. We say it all the time, but a lot of people think, hey, when I get through with phase 1, get the deployment, wipe my brow, and do the training, and now we're on to the next project. But what happens when you hire 5, 10, 50, 100 people? We had one client hiring 1,000 people a year. They were growing that fast. What happens when you hire 1,000 people next year? Training events already happened. How do you continue to train? What is your process for continuous training of those people, learning management? How do you make sure that they know what they're going to do, and how do they adopt it? So making sure that training is not a one-time event that happens. Creating ambassadors, champions, evangelists that go out into your organization. And again, this is where a project team really helps to create and find who these ambassadors are. It'll help you scale. If you're 1 or 2 or 3 people on this project team, get a bigger project team. It'll help you scale and go out into the organization and really share that. And then lastly, start early and repeat. When we're doing our training and our governance and adoption and those kind of things, we actually start within a couple weeks of the actual project kickoff, in parallel, a lot of times, with building servers and getting infrastructure set up. And people are like, why are you doing training then? Because by the time we get to deployment, then people are excited. They're talking about it. We've done communication plans. People know what's going on. They know when it's coming out, and they're very comfortable with using it. And so it really helps with adoption on day 1, because people have had time to get that. So we've started these processes in parallel, which kind of leads us to the second column there, which is the proclaim, right? So making sure that we're communicating, making sure that we're sharing what we're doing. It's amazing to us to see how many people will do something and never even do any kind of corporate communication, roll it out, whatever. So we spend a lot of time as part of our governance developing communication plans, developing a plan for the channel it's going to go out. Are we going to hang banners in the break room? Are we going to send that out via email? Who's it going to come from? When are we going to send that? And making sure that we're sending out the message that this is what's coming, here's how to get excited, here's how to get involved. I'd mentioned it before, but people adopt what they help create. Get people engaged and involved. And then lastly, make it easy to provide feedback. A lot of us don't want to hear feedback, but it's amazing how quickly you can change, and there's some really easy low-hanging fruit that you could probably do to help people get engaged quicker. And one of the things that we've put together, and you can download this from our website, it's also part of our toolkit that organizations buy from us, is this feedback solution. So we've got it for SharePoint 2013. There's an older version for 2010, but you basically install it on your site collection level. Anybody with site collection admin can install it. It puts a feedback button at the top you can see there. When they click it, it pops up a dialog right there on the page that they're on. They don't leave the page. They can enter their information. It tracks the full page all the way down to the page and the site they were on, and then submits that to the bottom one there you can see into a feedback list. And then someone can set alerts, can follow up. The steering committee can review that. They can prioritize, and it goes right into a list, all within 30 seconds or less for a user to provide great feedback. And it's been tremendous in helping with adoption and getting that feedback and making changes that really help us tune our SharePoint to our users, right? Otherwise, it's, you know, Sally or John that's sitting there and has to say, man, let me write that down. Oh, I forgot about it. Or let me switch over to email. Now let me tell our project team what's going on. They're not going to do that, right? When they're in SharePoint, they're focused on the task at hand. So this is a really cool thing. Feel free to go to our website and download it. And it's helped tremendously with just capturing feedback from your organization. So as we wrap up, I know it's a ton of content. Had to go through it fast. One, you'll get a survey at the end of this as a quick sidebar. I'd love to have your feedback on this new format of 30 minutes. I know it's rapid fire, but hopefully it's really easy to consume, and you guys can grab it, go back and watch it later. This will be up on YouTube in a week or so. But the last quote I'll leave you is kind of talking about change, and adoption is change, right? It's going to change how people work, and people don't necessarily like to change, right? They want to stay the way it is, but without change, there's no innovation, there's no incentive for improvement, and you guys are the change agent. You guys that are trying to do this project and have a role in the project are the ones who are initiating these changes, and those people will have a better opportunity to manage that change and to work with that change, and that's what you're here for, right? To make sure we can manage it and get people to engage, because it can happen. We've seen adoption rates off the charts, 80, 90%, but there's some small things you can do to kind of change that. So again, right at time, so I'm happy I was able to get through that. I know I kind of talked pretty fast, hopefully, on a lot of those, but again, go back and watch this. We'll send out, and we'll have it out there on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, probably in a week or so. You can subscribe to that. And as we kind of close, and before you guys jump off, if there's any other ones I put up here on the screen, other webinars we've got coming up, we've got a pretty robust webinar schedule, two to four a month we're trying to do. There's 3 on here for CRM if you do have CRM, and then there's one that I'm really excited about as well around SharePoint success. It will take some of these concepts but then build it out. It's an hour session, failure to connect, and why organizations are kind of struggling. So it drills into that 61%, why people are struggling. And again, that's an hour, and that's on September 10th, so in a couple weeks. But if you want to sign up, please feel free. That's at events.c5insight.com. Or welcome your feedback. Really appreciate you guys spending 30 minutes with us on this beautiful day. And again, information for you on the screen for C5. We have a very active blog, very active on Twitter and LinkedIn groups. Reach out to us. Love to hear from you. Not going to get a huge sales pitch from us. We just want to know that organizations are kind of how they're doing with this, where they are in their process, and if there's anything we can do to add value and serve them better. So with that, I'll wrap it up and appreciate everybody coming. Thank you guys so much.